Welcome to the Mining and Metallurgical Society of America webinar series. MMSA is an association of senior industry professionals who conduct themselves and their work to the highest standards. The society only accepts applicants who have been educated, trained, and experienced in the mining industry for at least 10 years and who have been referenced by colleagues and industry peers. Once a member, a professional may apply to be a qualified person with the earned expertise in one or more defined professions from specified and extended work in the industry. If you are interested in becoming an MMSA member, please be sure to check out our website at mmsa.net for information on the application process. The Society is dedicated to increasing public awareness and understanding about mining and why mined minerals are essential to modern society and human well-being. The Society concerns itself with fundamental principles and with problems facing the industry in such areas as legislation, economics, and education, as well as environmental concerns, labor relations, and health and safety. Representatives of the Society from time to time testify before legislative bodies and provide advice to federal agencies. The MMSA provides continuous professional development opportunities for its members through this QP webinar series. This series provides subject matter expert lectures on a wide range of mining topics and it is presented most months of the year. My name is Kristen Guerin-Davy, MMSA member and social media and webinar director. I'll be introducing our webinar today. The title of today's webinar is An Update on the Good Samaritan Hard Rock Law and the 2025 MMSA AML Summit by Jeremy Scott Collyard, U.S. Sector Leader Mining for SLR Consulting. Questions can be entered into the chat. The speaker will answer the questions after the presentation is complete. Please turn off your cameras unless you are asking the question. Jeremy Scott Collyard is an MMSA AML Committee Chair and has been a consultant in the mining sector for 20 years, primarily in the field of environmental permitting, compliance, remediation, and mine closure. Now I'll hand it off to Jeremy.
All right, perfect. Thanks so much for everybody attending this today and taking your time to listen to me yap away about something that I'm pretty passionate about. And really excited about where we are today versus where we were a year ago and even farther. Before I get going, I'd like to note that I gotta move this little box. There we go. That I have been the AML committee chair for MMSA for 2 years now, I think. But I think we really need to recognize those that came before my little stint here, Jeff Parsley, Ann Carpenter, among others, that really have been leading the efforts not only at MMSA, but within the mining industry to realize a Good Samaritan hard rock law. I'll talk briefly about kind of some timelines and how long it took, but MMSA has been engaged in getting this law passed for far before I got here, and that group, the MMSA AML Committee, has been instrumental in getting us to where we are. So I kind of feel like I'm coming in at the end, and hey, Jeremy's done such a great job, but really, it's just timing, of what's going on, and MMSA has just been absolutely instrumental in getting this law passed and previous laws pushed through. As he said, my name's Jeremy Collyard. I'm based out of Denver, and today I'm going to give you a high-level kind of rundown on the Hard Rock Good Samaritan efforts, drives for how we got here, and then I'll talk about what this law means and how to go about it, and then a little bit of a recap on the summit we just had in July up in Leadville. I'm gonna, what is this? On this side, there we go. So this presentation is touching on two topics. One is for me that are really important to me. One is effective and successful mine closure remediation, and the other is around legacy, not just personal legacy, but our industry, our legacy as miners, which I'm sure we all as miners can agree that we as an industry have a negative legacy currently in the U.S. And but that doesn't mean that, legacies aren't just positive and negative. There's always in the middle. And we do have a hard time as an industry with our social license to operate and how we as an industry are viewed. And I see Good Samaritan, I see this law and Good Sam projects as a wonderful opportunity for our industry to demonstrate who we are, what is important to us, and modify our legacy, which we certainly have the opportunity to do. I'm sure all you guys listen to hip hop, so there you go. There's a quote for Eminem. And I'm bringing this up, and I know this is kind of off. We're not necessarily talking about our legacy as an industry in this presentation today, but I'm bringing this up because during our summit in July, there was a regulator who asked a question, and he was pretty set on it. And his question was, why would a mining company be a good Samaritan? We had a panel of industry leaders there, folks from Freeport, Integra, Rio Tinto, others, and it was really interesting that this regulator asked this question in such a confident way. Here is somebody that has a role with our industry, that interacts with us very often in that role as a regulator. And the question was not, it was dead set. It was, I don't really understand why any mining company would be a good Samaritan. And that was kind of shocking to me, coming from a regulator especially, and somebody that was at the summit. So that's why I wanted to just touch briefly on legacy sort of stuff. On the screen, there have been studies conducted to date. You can see this is super dated. This is about 9 years old. States are moving forward with their own inventories. USGS has been putting together an inventory. So I'm sure data is updated, but I wanted to kind of set the stage here. This is from a study that was done in 2016, BLM and National Park Service trying to put together an inventory of hard rock AMLs in the US. And theirs came in around 50,000, a little bit over 50,000 sites. You can see the map here showing dark reds where we see the majority of them, and then crimson whites, of course. And I think this is an interesting one. There isn't much value to me to in speaking with other state agencies, federal agencies that are putting together inventories. And I'm sure speaking to you guys in this presentation right now, we all know there's far more than 50,000 sites within the US that are hard rock AMLs. Estimates truly are well over 500,000. And as these inventories start to come in from key states like California, Nevada, Colorado, Idaho, we're all expecting, that number could get closer to 750,000. So, but wanted to throw this up to take a look at, to try to give us a geographic perspective here. So what is Good Samaritan legislation? The first proposal for hard rock Good Sam was in 2006, 20 years ago. It was a bill called the Cleanup of Inactive and Abandoned Mines Act. And obviously, it wasn't passed. But a brief, and I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure, but in hard rock mining, unlike coal mining, where with coal we have SMACRA and we have funds that have been set aside for coal abandoned mines to be remediated, that doesn't exist for hard rock. So there's a need, obviously, to deal with these AMLs and to create environmental and human health improvements on these public lands that have no PRP or no responsible party. But there's a desire. There's a desire by our state agencies, our local communities, our federal agencies, by us as an industry, and we all have this desire to go clean these sites up. But the mechanism to do so really isn't there or hasn't been there up until this bill got passed. The funding additionally is not really there. Certainly we have CERCLA, and CERCLA can tackle certain projects, large scale, beasts. But a lot of these AML sites and their impacts aren't necessarily big beasts of a project. They're more death by a thousand needles sort of projects where we look at a watershed or we look at multiple watersheds that have numerous, sometimes, and for those of us that live in Colorado, Southern Colorado is a great example, or even driving up the I-70 from Denver to Silverthorne to go skiing. It's a great example. There are adits and waste rock dumps and ore stockpiles, all over the place, and they're small. So those don't really get the attention of a surplus sort of project, and they kind of sit. State agencies have been getting after them, finding ways to move forward. Other NGOs like Trout Unlimited have also found ways to get after some cleanup projects, but there's a bit of risk there. Obviously, no funding, that sort of stuff. So the goal here of Good Samaritan legislation, all the way back into the beginning, was to find Good Samaritans, to allow Good Samaritans to come in and conduct reclamation on hard rock mine sites. The key difficulty leading up to this was around liability, and this law that was just passed last year and the laws previous were trying to address that. And I think a key element and I'll probably say this numerous times today as I'm talking, is the idea of significant improvements, but not necessarily meeting a criteria as a potential new operator. So, we have, if I talk water, receiving water quality standards, and we have discharge, and we all, I'm sure, are familiar with the Clean Water Act. And if we can get a constituent, say, reduced by 75% at a site as a Good Samaritan, that really moves the needle a whole bunch. But getting it all the way to that standard, may not be economically feasible. It may be difficult engineering, all sorts of other ways. But if we can make a significant improvement and set a criteria, in this case, talking Clean Water Act, a discharge criteria, for example, that is achievable, that is making significant improvement, that should be acceptable. And that's kind of a fundamental idea here with this Good Sam legislation, and that's how the bill is written, the law is written now. So talking about the law now, this was passed late last year in 2024. It received bipartisan support, unprecedented bipartisan support, which is fantastic. And I'm sure, again, speaking to this group, not surprising that we would have such support for an important cleanup sort of law. It is a law now. It is in its stages of planning and guidance, and I'll get into that here in a minute. But at a high level, here you go. The law that was passed allows for 15 projects to go forward. You'll see on the screen there's 15 Good Samaritan permits and then 15 investigative sampling permits. Essentially, the structure for this is very NEPA. So if we think of it in that sense, a Good Samaritan will prepare a plan of operations. Oddly, it'll be around reclamation, not necessarily extraction. And therefore we need some baseline studies. We need to understand what the site is. We need to understand what our geochemistry is, what our geotech, all the fun things that go into a plan of operations that go into support a plan of operations. Cost estimates need to be submitted, those sort of things. And so the idea of the 15 projects and the 15 investigation permits is to allow those Good Samaritans that don't have characterization really done yet, that may need another year or two to collect the data so that they can fully understand if they want to move forward with that plan, to give them that opportunity, and at the same time not slow down others that do have characterization completed and are ready to go. So we are limited to 15 permits, 15 projects, but we can have multiple different projects going on both of these roads, and allowing those to move over from investigation to project, or allow that investigation to perhaps end with this isn't going to be feasible, or we have significant more data to collect, and there isn't a commitment or an obligation to move forward with the project itself. I mentioned the shields around Clean Water Act and CERCLA. This is a program being managed by the EPA. So the EPA is at the helm, but also, as we all know, we have multiple other regulatory agencies that are going to be engaged for these projects: state agencies, tribal agencies, local governments, those sort of things, BLM, U.S. Forest Service, all of that. Again, think NEPA, the level of data that we need, the level of planning that's needed to go in and allow the EPA to issue a permit. The goal is, so with the law, we have 7 years to demonstrate success. So it is a small window, which is challenging and helpful to the project selection by the EPA, and it should be helpful for us as Good Samaritans to selecting the projects that we want to move forward. We have a 7-year window to permit the project, execute the project, and demonstrate success of the project. And that last one, really, to me, defines what these projects will look like when we think about our post-closure monitoring for most of our mining projects, far longer than 7 years. So that should give you guys an idea of the scale of these projects for these 15 pilot projects that'll move forward. As you can see here in a bullet, and I should note, I pirated a bunch of this information from a presentation made by David Hockey with the EPA. David is leading the program on behalf of the EPA and did a presentation for us up at the summit. So thank you, Dave, for letting me steal your information. The goal for the EPA is to get these 15 projects initiated by 2028, meaning shovel in the ground, and we are in construction and things are moving forward. They would like all 15 to go forward. Next slide. So here's a bit of a description of what the EPA is looking for in these projects. As I mentioned, 15 is going forward. This covers the entire United States, including Alaska and Hawaii. This also covers tribal land. And because this is a pilot program in law, the goal for the EPA is to demonstrate a diverse range of projects. So we're looking at geographic, a project in key states is important. Really, the EPA would love to see a project in Alaska, a project in California, Nevada, Colorado, these states. Also, looking for diverse environmental conditions. Because it's a pilot program, it's about trying to demonstrate the success in highly variable areas, whether it's climate, whether it's land ownership, those sort of things. The other things that the EPA is asking to see out of these projects is around partnership. So working with more and diverse local agencies, working with tribal agencies that I mentioned, working with state agencies to really show and down to a local community. Often we have local communities that are affected by these AMLs. And so really the EPA would love to see some projects moving forward that have a diverse set of engagement from a small local level all the way up. Again, demonstrating the success of this law long term. And then there's some examples there. I mentioned a key aspect of what success would be. Another key aspect and an interesting bit of language in the law is the use of the term low risk. So the law states that these 15 projects will be low risk, meaning that they pose a low risk to the environment, and that is determined by the EPA. And that's a challenging hurdle to get over, right? We're all scientists and engineers. We like numbers. We like fixed things. And this is a bit narrative. So I'm going to simplify this slide and just say the low risk definition is that the second bullet here is that it ends in a FONSI. So again, I mentioned we're very NEPA structured as this thing moves forward. And so we're thinking this needs to be an EA and it needs to end in a FONSI. And that is how the EPA is looking at low risk. Other things that I'll say in the law that are not considered are adits and shafts. So we are not looking at closing and remediating shafts. We're not looking at bulkheads. We're not looking at those sort of things. But in this process, as a Good Samaritan collects their baseline data, develops a plan, and is ready to present it to the EPA in an application, we should be mindful that an EA will be drafted and a FONSI will be the conclusion of NEPA. And if we don't have confidence that that can be the conclusion of the review by the EPA, then it's probably not a low risk project and therefore shouldn't be considered in this first 15 projects. I'll also say what are our opportunities here? And our opportunities are quite broad. We have the opportunity under this 15 pilot program law to do reprocessing. And it is a goal for the EPA for us to have at least one reprocessing project, again, trying to demonstrate the viability of the law moving forward. So we do have an opportunity to reprocess. And we are seeking reprocessing, or the EPA is seeking reprocessing projects, and it could be multiple. That certainly introduces a challenge when we consider the complexity of reprocessing and when we consider the 7-year window. But I'll give an example as we get a little farther down the road in this presentation where reprocessing opportunities, they are quite small, but they're there and they're possible. I'll also note when we're talking reprocessing that no profit can be generated from the reprocessing element. If profit is generated, then it goes into a fund that is controlled by the EPA, and that fund is only able to be used for future Good Sam hard rock projects. So so there's a limitation as well with the reprocessing side. I talked about the 75% sort of goal. Here on this slide, it's talking about what is measurable progress. So in the law, it does say measurable progress, but it does not define what that means. We, as Good Samaritans submitting applications, we'll need to provide our success criteria and an explanation of why that would be measurable success, to allow the EPA to understand it and approve it. And so a lot of these, I mentioned Clean Water Act, and I'll probably just be talking water, but it is also around soil quality or waste rock quality, impacts to soils and sediments. Also, there is consideration around safety. I know, but I mentioned, like, this isn't about plugging portals and knocking down head frames necessarily. It's more environmentally focused. And then it's around threat reduction. So there is some language in there on to help us understand what our success criteria is. So let's talk a little schedule. There was, as I mentioned, the law passed December 2024. There was a summit in April 2025 at the Colorado School of Mines, with the EPA, a whole pile of NGOs and others. MMSA was there. It was a great summit. It was positive. The EPA has been very engaging on developing this guidance. If you look at the law, it is not, it is pretty narrative. It isn't very strict on exactly what an application needs to look like. There isn't a lot of detail. So the EPA is in the process of defining these things. And they've been very engaging with as I mentioned, industry, NGOs, MMSA, there's a whole pile of us, but they're trying to develop this guidance, and they're allowing us to provide input, which has been super nice. So there's been a bit of a slow start, and that's okay. We just got their financial assurance guidance for review, maybe 20 days ago, which is great to see. That's out for some public comments, seeking input. What do you guys want to see out of this financial assurance guidance, and what our requirements are going to be in those sort of things? The goal, and this is amazing to say on September 5th, but the target for the EPA is that guidance will be out and they will be ready to receive applications from Good Samaritans October 1st. So it's coming unbelievably quickly. And we'll see. I'm hopeful, and all of our discussions with the EPA lead us to believe this is gonna work out, and we're gonna be on this schedule. Again, as you saw on a previous slide, the goal is that shovels are in the ground by 2028. So we have very short windows to make this happen. So hopefully the application process opens as early as October 1st, which would be great. Guidance should be coming out as well from the EPA to help us as Good Sams develop our applications and move things forward. There's probably one key bullet that I want to point out on this slide, which is the pre-application discussions. So because this is such a narrative guidance, and because there is flexibility in terms like low risk, the EPA is very much focused on, as a Good Sam, reaching out, setting up pre-application meetings, and moving the ball forward together as a Good Samaritan and as the EPA and as other agencies prior to applications coming in. The EPA doesn't have a ton of resources dedicated to this. They do have resources dedicated, but it's not 50 people sitting in a room waiting to review a pile of applications. So as Good Sams, we should very much focus on setting up pre-application meetings, getting our ducks in a row so that conversations can be happening with the EPA prior to an application, so that we can try to streamline this approach. Financial assurance, I mentioned. I'm going to kind of push through this pretty quick, but financial assurance is a key aspect of this. Again, think NEPA, think plan of operations. You're going to have to put a bond up if we want to go open something up. Same approach here. Part of the application will include a cost estimate. That cost estimate is going to include, CapEx, OpEx, post-closure monitoring, the whole nine. And once accepted, a bond will have to be posted before the Good Samaritan moves forward with construction. Cost estimates will have to be modified over time. That's understood. Everybody's happy there. The financial assurance mechanism can be modified, which is pretty nice. And then there's other language around accessing these funds and when those funds get released. Timeline again, September, there's a webinar being planned. The financial assurance guidance is out right now for public comment. And in October, applications should be coming in. The goal is for the EPA, they're referring to them as tranches. They would like to have 3 tranches of projects move forward. 5 projects, 5 and 5. They would, and because of the goal here of demonstrating success of the law and demonstrating viability, really looking to have shovels in the ground, if possible, as early as 2026 on these smaller projects. So they're hopeful that this first batch of applications will include up to 5 projects that are relatively simple, relatively easy to execute. Characterization of the site is complete, and we can get going as early as 2026. So they're teed up and ready to go. They're excited about it, and we as an industry, I believe, are excited as well. I'm going to share this flow diagram. For those of you that do a lot of permitting, look at this diagram. I love it. It's very simple. But this flow diagram has been provided. While it isn't super simple to review, and it's 2 pages, but it gives a really good flow diagram of how we go from pre-application meeting. Again, as you can see, pre-application meeting, very important to the EPA. Going from pre-application meeting on down the road. Is this a good SAM project? Does it meet the requirements? Okay, yes, it does. And then off we go into the next steps to allow this permit to move forward. And whether that's a Good Samaritan permit of actual construction and post-closure monitoring, or it starts in the investigation. This shows both of these pathways. As you can see, this one coming back, investigation is complete, everybody's feeling good, we're ready to rock, and then you can bounce over, get priority. I should have mentioned that as an investigation sampling permit. Once you're completed, it's a priority then to move that into construction. So we don't know if there's going to be a big line of applications, but if there were, as a investigation project, you're going to jump to the front of the line so that project can move forward. There's set timelines. They're driven to get these things done and approved quickly and get shovels in the ground. So these things are available. I can provide them if you want. So perhaps, if you do, just make a comment here in the presentation, and maybe we can send out some links and some other files for you guys to take a look at. All right, I'm going to talk about the summit now real quick. So we had our summit this was our 7th summit. We did take a break during COVID, and then we had a virtual summit. And then we came back in person, but there has been 7 of these summits to date. This was the 2nd one held in Colorado. Previous places have been Montana, Arizona, Nevada, that sort of stuff. We had just about 100 attendees in total. We had 80 people in person, which was absolutely fantastic, and we had almost 20 online. Those in attendance, a lot of agencies, as you could imagine, both federal and state. I mentioned we had an industry panel, and thank you to those guys that spent the time and took the time to be there and be asked questions. But we had pretty good industry interest, which is fantastic as well. And then a lot of NGOs. Trout Unlimited, you're going to hear probably me. I've probably already said Trout Unlimited 5 times. They have really spearheaded this effort as well. They've demonstrated projects in the past with taking on a little bit of risk. And so NGOs like Trout Unlimited were present as well, which is great. Simply put, though, I think when we look at around 100 attendees, I look at, these are people that are going to be good Samaritans and are going to pick up projects or are going to be engaging with those good Samaritans on a regulatory side. Next year, we'll have another summit. We haven't determined where it is. We are seeking someone as MMSA to get involved and take the reins for me as the AML Committee Chair and figure out what it's going to be for next year. We also have a site visit with these summits, which has been fantastic. And obviously, Leadville was a great place for us to have a site visit, given all of the AMLs out there and the Circla site. We had over 30 people in attendance for that, which is great. This photo on the bottom right is the group looking over some work that Trout Unlimited had done. And also wanted to say a big thanks to Nick Michael, MMSA member. He hosted us on a project that he's working on up there of a legacy asset, reprocessing focused, and he was great as well. So we got to spend a day together with those 33 people, and yeah. So out of this, we had regulatory agencies coming in, and we had state agencies. State agencies have their own inventories going on. Most state agencies have their own AML programs going on. And so our drive for the summit this year was to allow the EPA to introduce the bill, introduce how they want to go about it, guidance, all the things I just talked about, and then have multiple states come up and really present some projects to say, hey, these are ones that we would really like to get after. We have good characterization data. We have confidence that it meets the requirements. And we see these as wonderful projects to be a good SAM project. So it was kind of like, I don't know, it was kind of like a game show, where states were presenting, hey, I've got this project or that project, and what do you guys think about this and think about that? So I'm going to run through a few here before closing out the presentation. Arizona, obviously key state for AMLs. This project here on the screen is called the Catherine Mine. This site is if you guys are familiar with Arizona, this is Bullhead City area. So this is northwest, right next to Lake Mojave, which you can see over here on the left. I don't know if you can see my arrow, but if you can, it's over there. Catherine Mine is essentially these dumps that you can see right here. It is on national park land. The National Park Service manages the land. So we view that actually as kind of a plus. We talked about diversity and working with different agencies. There's an interest, a certain interest from the state, obviously, to deal with this site, and there's interest from the National Park Service to deal with this site. So those are positives. And they've got some good characterization dealt with. So this site operated for about 30 years. It closed in the 30s. It was a gold-silver operation. Those landforms that we just saw in the aerial image are our tailings facilities, and there is no PRP at this stage. So the Arizona DEQ AML division presented this one and said, I think this is a good opportunity. They presented others as well, but this is one I felt like highlighting. The pros, when we talk about low risk, there aren't a ton of constituents here that are causing issues. The depth to groundwater is quite deep. So really, the state of Arizona sees great opportunity for this project and feels it's low risk. It's characterized, ready to go. They also view this as a potential reprocessing given the quantity of material there. I'm going to jump to Colorado. I'm just doing one from each state since we have a kind of limited time. This is the Griffin mine site. This is outside of Leadville. Obviously, it's outside of the surplus site up there in Leadville. It is private land. Private lands are able to be a good SAM. There are certain rules that go along with it, with future development and that sort of stuff. But private land certainly can be a good SAM project. The state of Colorado views Griffin as a really good one. As you can see, this is a classic Colorado AML. We've got waste rock, we have ore stockpiles, we have our waste materials that you can see kind of this little cut here. We've got a stream running this way. We've got a bit of a spring influence happening. You can see seeping coming out of the bottom of these dumps. It's a great example of a AML in Colorado. And this is viewed by the state as a great AML good SAM project to move forward. Characterization data is present and available. It is to them low risk. We are not in a major waterway. We're not in a crazy slope. This really is about closure that we do as an industry all the time with some geotech stability, some cap cover, some isolate water, those sort of things. So this is what Colorado put out there as a potential opportunity. They had obviously multiple others to present. Idaho, I talked about inventory earlier. Idaho has a heck of an inventory, and it's all on their website, which is nice, and it's great to see, and probably an amazing place to start if you're interested in Idaho. They presented the Gilmore town site and surrounding lands. This one's complicated. As I mentioned, again, looking for complex, diverse projects, want to demonstrate that this program, that this law has legs and can go beyond the 15. So the state of Idaho has been dealing with this one, operated into the 50s and then closed out. Private land as well. You can see on the figure to the right, those are all tracts. So essentially that landowner broke it out into tracts, and people have bought these individual tracts to either build tiny house sort of cabins or simply put a pad on and be able to bring their fifth wheel and spend, a month or two or whatever. But this entire area was a milling operation. So their soils are contaminated, arsenic and lead primarily. You can see the figure on the right are showing lead concentrations in the milligram per kilogram. And that dark red is 16, basically 17,000 to 30,000 milligram per kilogram lead. So fair amount of contamination impacting surface water, risk to human health, those sort of things. And complex land ownership. But a lot of data has been collected, fits the bill for a good SAM project. They presented this one and really liked it. And my last little project to take a look at is Wyoming. And I mean, the other states presented, Nevada, California, Utah, New Mexico, not cutting them out, just trying to keep my presentation short here. So Wyoming, they presented this one. This is the Ferris Haggerty mine. It is an underground operation. The copper contamination, obviously you can see in the photo, there's a fair amount of blues in there. There is an adit, and there are these shafts, and we've got water discharging. So this is a good example of we're not plugging adits, we're not building bulkheads, we're not doing those sort of things, but we have a water that is well characterized. We have flow data, we have geochemistry data, and that water needs to be managed. And we have that ability under the Good SAM law to tackle water treatment ideally passive, but tackle a flow like this. The state of Wyoming mentioned there is a lot of interest in this watershed due to fisheries, and they have made improvements as the state with what funding they do have, but it's relatively limited, and they feel this would be a fantastic Wyoming Good Sam AML project. And then there's my last slide. So I mentioned, you know, in the beginning around legacy, and we have as an industry, I think we all can agree, a legacy that isn't all positive, and we as an industry have an interest in improving that legacy. And this Good Samaritan law not only gives us the opportunity to improve the environment and to improve the areas that I'm sure all of us on this call love to spend time in the mountains and the streams, you know, out in nature. But it's also a wonderful opportunity for us as an industry to demonstrate what's important to us, and to demonstrate that we are stewards of the land, and our engagement with our local communities, our engagement with stakeholders, and how we leave a site as an industry is very different now than it was in 1920. And I don't think, personally, I don't think a lot of the people that live in the US fully understand that what mining is now is very different than what it was. And a lot of that to me has to do with our legacy. And so I really see this Good Samaritan law as an opportunity for us to change that and to demonstrate who we are and what we do. So with that, I'll say thank you so much again for taking the time, and I can answer questions if you guys have them.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. That was really great and definitely good for those of us who weren't able to attend. Betty has a question here in the chat. How are the projects funded?
All right, so Good Samaritan projects are funded by the Good Samaritan. That could be, you know, 5 guys that want to pool their money and get after it. It could be NGOs like a Trout Unlimited or like a Sierra Fund or like any of the other NGOs. And it could be industry partners. Freeport-McMoRan in Colorado has invested a fair amount of money in voluntary remediation projects. Other companies like Rio Tinto and Newmont and BHP have done the same. So any Good Samaritan, the funding can come literally from anywhere, with the exception of the federal government. So if anybody wants to start a GoFundMe, you know, we could put something together.
So Jeremy, this is Doug Stiles. So to your knowledge, have any mining companies kind of stepped up yet and indicated they plan to meet any of the deadlines for project submittal?
I would say not officially, but there is a short list that I think have absolute interest in doing it. And perhaps they are moving forward and I'm just not aware. But we have heard from industry members that they are very much interested, but I can't say like for certain that somebody's teed up and ready to go.
One follow up on that. If one of your clients asked for you to kind of provide the value proposition for signing up for a project, you know, say they had to go to their board or they had to, you know, get some internal authorization, what would you have them focus on? What would be the value proposition for a mining company?
I think the value proposition for the mining company has to do with probably 2 things. One, as an existing operator, how they're viewed by their local community. And I think that's where, you know, if we look at Perpetua and what they've done at Stibnite, which, you know, would be a Good Sam project potentially now. There was a lot of investment for them. and I think it is around it is around social license to operate. For a future operator, I think it is, and again, back to a bit of a Perpetua story, it's an opportunity to demonstrate to those stakeholders that have concerns prior to moving, to moving forward with something, that the drive for that company isn't strictly extraction, profit, all the things that potential opposition to our industry focus on. I think lastly, and I know ESG is a term thrown around all the time, but our clients, I mean, I'm a consultant, so our industry, we do have an interest in demonstrating that we're stewards of the land, in finding beneficial post-closure land use, in finding compromises and solutions that serve not just the purpose of that particular operation, but the community. And so I think that's the other drive as well. It's in us. I mean, and our industry as a mining industry has done this for a very long time, not necessarily in the environmental space at all times, but when we think about improvements that mining operations bring to the community, things like water treatment plants and schools, infrastructure, it's always been in our industry to bring value to, outside of the operation. And so I think that's where those mining companies, can see a value out of this.
And I would just real quick, I agree with you, Jimmy. That's a great response. I would assume then that if you were a mining company and you were contemplating undertaking one of these projects, it seems like it would at least have to be in conjunction with, very close to, either an exploration project, an existing project, something you're looking at. It seems like it gets tougher to justify kind of undertaking a project that really has no connection to a project you either have or anticipate having. Is that a fair way to look at it?
I think that's the low-hanging fruit of it. But when we look at, for example, Nevada Gold Mines, significant operator in the state of Nevada. If they want to go tackle an AML project in the state of Nevada, does it need to be necessarily near one of their operations or planned operations? I would say the answer to that is no, because the optics, how Nevada Gold Mines is viewed in the entire state is still, even though you may not be next to one of their operations, you can be somewhere else in the state of Nevada, still impacted by an AML, still able to be benefited from that Good Sam stepping in and doing the work. And it doesn't necessarily have to be associated with a future operation or with the neighboring operation, because it's a larger scale than that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense especially for like a Nevada Gold Mine. That makes sense. Yeah, thanks, Jeremy.
Or it'd be like, if we look at Arizona, it's a Freeport, right? And Good Sams they are not individuals. In an ideal world, it's a team. And so perhaps this is an opportunity for multiple operators in a particular region to get together and form a group and get after it. Because not only is it it isn't just in the best interest of that individual company, for example, or that individual Good Samaritan, it's in the interest of our overall industry. And so I could absolutely see where a couple companies come together, pool their resources, not just financially, but their engineers and their scientists, that have the experience, have the knowledge to go execute one of these projects successfully, pool those resources and get after it. Because ultimately, again, it's our social license to operate and how we're viewed as an industry isn't limited just to our logo. It's limited to all of us. And so I think yeah, I think it could be bigger than that.
Oh, good. Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate that.
Yep.
We have another question in the chat from Lynn. Can the Good Samaritans advertise that they clean up sites, for example, on sites like social media or even regular advertising?
100%. And on the EPA side, as the project moves forward, it is the information obviously is made available. You think NEPA, you think e-planning. So who those Good Samaritans are, unless they want to be kept confidential, is absolutely present to the public and encouraged to be more present as an individual. It's a great demonstration of what they're committed to.
Great. Another question from Betty here. Is it feasible for MMSA to facilitate getting groups together to do these projects?
I think it is. I don't think there's any reason for us not, as MMSA, not to be engaged. We have had there's an AML group at AEMA, and we've had conversations, similarly with them, like how can an industry group like MMSA, AEMA, SME, whatever it is, help facilitate these sort of connections. And I think the short answer is there's nothing stopping us.
Okay. Karen asks, is NMA at all involved in providing or encouraging any support or finances to industry membership?
NMA is, they were at the summit in April and they are highly involved. I do not know about financial support or things like that.
Jeremy, this is Jody Kelso.
Hey, what's up, Jody?
Let's not forget you were talking about Stibnite could be a good sim project. Let's not forget that they're actually going to make money and do this at a profit. And, that is a huge difference from what Good Sam allows to happen. As you know, my opinion on this thing. There have been many of us for decades who've been trying to clean up abandoned mines. And, there's really been no one out there to help us. I'm glad you guys are making some progress in this particular area, but it appears nobody really is working with those of us who are trying to clean up the 15% that could be cleaned up at a profit. As a matter of fact, not only do we not get any help from anybody, but as I keep saying, Trout Unlimited and other NGOs have actually got in the way of cleaning up some substantially large sites. So, this is going in one direction, yeah, but you can't say that that would be a Good Sam project because it couldn't. They're making money.
No, so I appreciate the question, Jody, and let me clear it up. So the Perpetua Stibnite project would not be a Good Sam project, but Perpetua has invested a couple $1,000,000 in the last 2+ years doing voluntary cleanup of some of the brownfield sites around the Stibnite project area. And so when I said what Perpetua has been doing would be a great example of a Good Sam project, and it could be now, I should have been really clear that what I was referring to was their voluntary remediation of some waste rock dumps and some stormwater management and some consolidation that has happened already that have nothing, I shouldn't say nothing, that are not related to their future operation.
Yeah, to be clear, we've been offering far more than that in the projects we worked on. We actually offered in the gross revenue to Trout Unlimited for Whitewood Creek tailings, 5% of the gross revenue, and we were going to clean up everything everywhere and have everything stored at the end. So it's not like those are the only ones that would do that. That would make sense for any of the projects we were going to do as well.
Thank you, Jody. Are there questions from anyone else?
This is Pat Gochner. Jody, Jeremy, thanks for the presentation today. The low hanging fruit, you've got schedules that are limiting things. You've got some brackets on things, schedule wise, intent wise. And what appears to be the low hanging fruits are the existing operators. But there has to be a carrot with that. And more than likely, it would be along the lines of expansion project opportunities where you're continuing to build goodwill with these things. That seems to glow with your presentation today. It's really hard to go out and just grab something out of nowhere and think that you're going to get Park Service and an MOU done in the schedules that you're talking about. Any thoughts or rebuttal on that?
There's no rebuttal. It is a challenging schedule. And so I think as the group of individuals that's kind of been pushing this forward and been in these meetings over the last couple of years, there is a little concern there because to demonstrate success in 7 years, it's going to put us at a certain scale. And when you say I need to demonstrate success in 7 years, but I also want to show complexity in projects, like those are two conflicting, that's a challenge. So I agree with you. And then when we bring in the complexity of other agencies, and a process that hasn't been done, the NEPA approach to this is fine. And it's a road that other agencies understand, and that I think we all understand. But I think we also understand how time-consuming that potentially can be. So I think the key on these projects that can get pushed forward in this time frame really is around not only the scale of the work, but what characterization you have now. Because even there in this conversation, we're not talking about the risk of even meeting success, right? It's like, I've got a time frame that's going to be a challenge. I've got agencies I need to get on board. I have this whole process to go down. And that's not even considering when the applicant develops their success criteria, that's the end game. And so there's a whole other risk there around characterization and site understanding to allow that applicant to be comfortable in setting that standard and then even going into the process. So I think key to this first 15 is scale and its current understanding. And that's why we push to the states, right? Because the states have invested and taken the time and have the data. And so if we can, we need to find sites that we have confidence in what the site is, confidence in what the reclamation approach is going to be, and that it'll be successful so that at that 7 years, or it could be prior, success is demonstrated. I think as well, some of these projects, are going to be small scale. They're going to be dump removals, right? They're going to be ore stockpile removals. And I think that's where reprocessing comes in and can really bring a bunch of value, where perhaps there is an operator nearby and they've got a leach pad or they've got a mill. And within a certain distance, there's a couple historic operations and there are stockpiles and there are waste rock dumps that are causing contamination to surface water. They're relatively small areas and we can get in there. We all know how to move dirt. We pick it up, we move it, we bring it to that site, we reprocess it. I think those sort of projects are to me on the top of the list of low-hanging fruit. But in the same sense, where we can
I throw out one more, Jeremy, and maybe on the NEPA side of things, maybe we look closer at lower hanging fruit. Is there any discussion on categorical exclusions as part of NEPA? The really, really low hanging where I thought I wrote down that you said that there can't be a profit end of things. So maybe if an existing operation has dump capacity and you wanted to pick up dump material and put it in a dump, there's no revenue generating there. You're cleaning it up. Has there been any discussion with agencies about getting a categorical exclusion and not getting into the long drawn out NEPA?
The long drawn out NEPA is a process that the EPA has to take to permit one of these projects. But I think when we start talking CADX, like you just said, if we're gonna bring X amount of cubic yards from point A to a operating facility, that would mean a potential mod to that permit, right? And I think that's where a CADX could happen, where you say, I'm just gonna be adding X amount more material. I'm not gonna build a new dump, but it is gonna maybe be a little bit different than our characterization, you know, those sort of things. Because, right, these permits can potentially overlap. And so I think that's where the opportunity for a CADX is. But as far as a Good SAM project, this process has to happen in a very NEPA way.
Yeah.
With that, many thanks to Jeremy for his excellent presentation, and thank you to all who attended the webinar. All of our webinars are uploaded to our YouTube channel and can be accessed through the mmsa.net website. The video of this webinar should be on the website within a week. We will post on our LinkedIn pages when the video and slides are posted to the website. Our next webinar will be in October, and we will announce the date and topic on our website, LinkedIn, and Eventbrite later this month. The MMSA webinars are supported by the MMSA Jacqueline Foundation. Again, if you are interested in becoming an MMSA member, please be sure to check out our website at mmsa.net for information on the application process. The webinar is now ended. Thank you.